After we install Git, there are a few configuration steps that need to be taken before we can create our first Git repository. So here we are again in the terminal. If your terminal or bash command prompt isn't open yet, you'll want to go ahead and get that open now if you're planning on following along. When we installed Git in the previous video, we checked to make sure that it's installed properly. But just to double check again, let's go ahead and type git -- version and hit enter. And if that shows you the version number of Git that you currently have installed, you're good to go. Now, before we can create repositories and start committing our work, we need to configure just a few things. To do this, we're going to use a Git command called config. The data we're about to put in is what's going to identify you in commit messages when you start working on a Git repository. So first, we'll put in our name. To do that, we'll type git config -- global user.name, and in quotes, go ahead and type in your name, and then close the quotes and hit enter. And while it does say global right here, this is actually just configuring a single user for you on your computer. Next, we're going to put in an email address. So to do that, again, we'll type git config -- global user.email, and then put in your email address. I'll put in nick@carsonified.com and hit enter. And notice that we're not actually using quotes around the email address like we did with the name. Now, as I mentioned before, the name and email address you put in here will go in all of your commit messages. It will identify you as the person making specific changes in text documents. This doesn't matter a whole lot right now, but as we move on to collaborative projects in the future, it most certainly will. Anytime you're just getting started with Git or bringing on a new Git user, this is a very important step to take. Now, like I said, these settings are just for you, and they're stored in your home directory in a file called git config. So let's take a look at that. I'll type cat, and I'll navigate to the home directory, and we'll take a look at git config. And there we can see our name and email addresses. Another good thing to do when you're getting set up is to turn on coloring. This will highlight Git commands and make it a little bit easier for you to follow the action. So let's go ahead and turn that on. Again, I'll type git config -- global, and we'll say color.ui, and we'll set it to true. And again, that will show up in our config file. So if we take a look, there you can see it right there. Now we're ready to create our first Git repository. You can think of a repository like a project. It's where all the previous versions of your work, along with your current work, will be saved. So first, either create a new directory or navigate to the directory where you're going to be working on your code. And I've already navigated to my web directory, so I'm going to just go ahead and create a new folder and then navigate into that folder. So I'm going to make a directory called my project, and then I'm going to change directories to my project. Now, to create a new Git repository, all we have to do is say git init. That's it. And then just hit enter. And this will automatically turn this folder into a Git repository. A lot of the time you'll hear people say the word repo instead of repository, so I'm just going to start using that because it's a little bit shorter. Now, if we want to see what's going on with the current version of our repo, we just need to type git status. Of course, there is a brand new folder here, so there's actually nothing going on in our repo. Let's create a new file and add it to our folder. So we're already inside of our folder, so we can just say touch, and I'll say index.html to create the file, and then we'll list the directory contents, and there you can see index.html has indeed been created. And now that we have a file, git status is going to look a little bit different. So we'll type git status again, And now git status is saying that we have some untracked files, And you can see that we have some highlighting going on here. And in order to track them and add these files to our repository, we're going to need to learn a few more commands. So far, we've learned how to install Git, set up users, and create repositories. In the next video, we'll learn a few more Git commands.